The book the woman had given him was called The Cartographer's Daughter. Elias read it that night, unable to put it down. It was a story about a girl who spent her life drawing maps of places she'd never been, imagining worlds beyond her small village, until one day she decided to stop imagining and start exploring. The story resonated with Elias in a way that felt almost painful. He saw himself in the cartographer's daughter, all that dreaming, all that planning, but never quite taking the leap. The book's ending was both hopeful and ambiguous. The daughter left her village, but the story ended as she was boarding a ship. Destination unknown. The reader never got to see what became of her. Elias thought about that as he lay in his cramped room, listening to the sounds of the city outside his window. Sirens, voices, the rumble of trains in the distance. He thought about how he'd spent so long dreaming of leaving the lighthouse that he'd never really thought about what would come after. What did he actually want? Not just freedom from the lighthouse, but what did he want to do with that freedom? The question kept him awake most of the night. By the time dawn broke, he had an answer, or at least the beginning of one. He wanted to create something. He wanted to tell stories. Not other people's stories, but his own. He wanted to write. It seemed absurd. He had no training, no connections, no idea how one even became a writer. But the desire was real, undeniable, a fire that had been smoldering in him since those afternoons in the lighthouse when he'd first started putting his thoughts on paper. The next evening, after work, he went back to the bookstore. The same elderly woman was there, in the same spot, reading a different book. "I finished it," Elias said, holding up the paperback. She looked up and smiled. And I think I know what I want to do with my life." Her smile widened. "Good, that's a start. Come, sit down. Tell me about it." They talked for hours. The woman's name was Margaret, and she'd owned the bookstore for 40 years. She'd been a teacher before that, and before that, a journalist. She'd lived a dozen different lives, she said, and each one had led her to the next. Writing isn't easy. It's lonely work. It requires discipline and persistence and the ability to fail over and over again without giving up. But if it's truly what you want, if it's what keeps you awake at night and gets you out of bed in the morning, then you have to pursue it. Not someday, not when you're ready, now. Margaret became Elias's mentor, though neither of them used that word. Several times a week after his shifts at the warehouse, Elias would stop by the bookstore. Sometimes they would talk about writing, about structure and character, about finding your voice, about the importance of reading widely and critically. Other times, they would just talk about life. Margaret had a gift for asking the right questions, for drawing out thoughts and feelings Elias didn't know he had. She asked about his mother, about his father, about the lighthouse. She listened to his stories with genuine interest, and occasionally she would say, "You should write that down. That's a story worth telling." So Elias started writing in earnest. He would wake up at 5 in the morning, before his warehouse shift, and write for 2 hours. It was hard at first. The words felt clumsy, his stories unfocused. But he kept at it, day after day, filling notebook after notebook with his attempts. He wrote about the lighthouse, about the sea, about isolation and loneliness. He wrote about fathers and sons, about grief and healing, about the weight of inherited pain. His early attempts were rough, overly sentimental, but slowly, with practice and Margaret's gentle guidance, he began to improve. 3 months after he'd started writing seriously, Margaret read his latest story, a piece about a boy who talks to ships passing in the night, imagining the lives of everyone aboard. When she finished, she set down the pages and looked at him with tears in her eyes. "This is good, Elias," she said. "Really good. You have something to say, and you're learning how to say it. You need to share this with more people." "How?" Elias asked, both thrilled and terrified by her response.
There's a literary magazine, Margaret explained. Small, local, but well-respected. They accept submissions from new writers. I think you should send them your story. The thought made Elias's stomach twist with anxiety. Sending his work out into the world, opening it up to judgment and potential rejection, it felt like standing naked in front of strangers. But he also knew Margaret was right. Writing in private, keeping his stories locked in notebooks, wasn't enough. If he wanted to be a writer, he had to be willing to be vulnerable. He submitted the story the next day before he could talk himself out of it. Then he went back to his routine. Work, write, read, repeat, trying not to obsess over whether he would hear back.